Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from New Jersey, we have Karen Ranzi. Karen is an award-winning author, internationally acclaimed speaker, holistic health coach, certified raw foods chef, speech pathologist, and director of an online vegan certification course. Her third book, Heal and Prevent Autism, Natural Solutions That Work, came out August 10th. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much for having me here, Fred.
Thanks for being here. Before we talk about your new book, I would like to start with your vegan journey. Can you tell us when and how you transitioned to a plant-based diet?
I transitioned to a plant-based diet. So if we're talking a total plant-based diet, it's 1989. I did go vegetarian 50 years ago, back in when I was 17. Not even sure what year that was, but I know it was 50 years ago. And I was eating still a lot of dairy. I actually think I was eating worse. I was eating so much dairy, and my favorite foods were cheddar cheese and cheese doodles.
Yeah.
I just used to binge on them, and I had severe cystic acne for 3 decades, and I wasn't healthy growing up on animal food. And then when I transitioned to a vegetarian, I transitioned for ethical reasons, but I really didn't understand what was happening on dairy farms because, we're not exposed to slaughterhouses and dairy farms and and factory farming. We're not exposed to any of this.
Right.
We're not even exposed to animals who are grass-fed. We're maybe exposed to that a little bit more because it's made out to look so much more humane, even when it's not.
Right.
But I was really never exposed to any of that. And I always had thought that it was okay to eat dairy, that as long as the animal wasn't killed. My father and grandmother, though, they were eating healthy vegan food. And my grandmother had been sick back in 1921. She had asthma and emphysema and was told that she had a very short time to live. But she changed her diet after reading a little book that was called The Mucusless Diet Healing System. Came out in about 1918. And she read that book, and it was all about plant food. And she said, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to try this and see if it can help me. And it saved her life. She lived another 50 years. And she was able to be with my father, thank goodness, who was only 4 years old at that time. And so I grew up hearing her healing story very frequently because she was living with us on and off. But my mother did not believe that it was good to raise children on plant foods because of protein, which is usually the first question that I right? I'm sure you do too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't raised on a plant-based diet. I was raised on an animal-based diet. I had processed food in my diet. I grew up in the 50s and 60s when processed foods became very popular, and that's when they were really developed. And so food started being made in a factory and packaged and preserved. And I wasn't a healthy kid because of it. I had frequent strep throat and ear infections and the flu every year. And my mother's way of taking care of me when I got sick was to give me scrambled eggs and toast. I still remember that. Scrambled eggs and toast were like to her the healing food, whereas my father and my grandmother were vegans way before the word vegan was even made.
Right.
And they were eating mostly whole foods. And, they did have lots of fruits and veggies and steamed vegetables in the evening and some soups. and they were very healthy. And they didn't go running to medical doctors for everything. They weren't on any medications, even my grandmother. And I saw that they were living very differently from those who were eating animals. And they also had a great respect for life.
Mm.
And my father and my grandmother picked up every little tiny insect and brought it outside. Whereas my mother had a fly swatter and she would kill the spiders and the insects.
Huh.
Yeah, and I very much connected with the way that my father and my grandmother were treating the other creatures who we share this planet with.
Right.
And I started wanting to be like them. So by the time I was 17, that really spoke to me, and I became a vegetarian. But I was eating a lot of dairy, and I developed a very severe cystic acne and also chronic digestive issues. I had irritable bowel syndrome for many years and premenstrual issues. I was basically a hormonal and gut mess. And I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. And I didn't listen to my father and my grandmother. I thought they were very weird. And, I grew up at a time when everybody was eating processed junk, and that was very acceptable. And animal foods, there wasn't even the consciousness that there is today. So many more people have become vegan. Vegan movement is growing,
Hmm.
and so many vegan alternatives, even for things like cheese. Some of them may be slightly processed, but they're a much better alternative than eating dairy. So we didn't have any of that back then. And I was very addicted to cheese. That was one of the harder things for me to give up. But then I didn't realize either what was happening on factory farms, and I didn't realize how cows are constantly impregnated in order for them to be constantly being able to give milk.
Right.
And when I found that out, and when I found out more about how dairy was affecting me through research I started doing later on, in 1989, I went vegan. And in 3 months, almost 3 decades of severe cystic acne completely cleared up.
Wow.
And so that was really mind blowing for me. I was angry because I had spent thousands of dollars on medications and doctor's visits, thousands and thousands of dollars over 3 decades. I had also been very embarrassed by it. I put lots of makeup on, and some of those things were also very toxic that I used, including the medications I was taking.
Right.
So I was really very angry. But I was also happy to be healed finally. And I was happy to go on and live a vegan life because I felt now I was really respecting animals. And not only did I want to love my cat and dogs, but I also wanted to love all animals. I wanted to love cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys, and I didn't want to eat them and I didn't want to eat their products. And so I was so thrilled. It was like an openness, a consciousness, a connection that I think when people come in, even if they're coming in for health reasons to a vegan lifestyle, learning and researching about what's really happening out there, what's really happening in the dairy industry, in the egg industry, in the slaughterhouses, what's really going on that we are not permitted to see. And there are ways of finding it online. There's plenty of videos of what really goes on in those places. And I would say, even if you don't like those things, if they get you upset, push yourself to see them anyway. Even though I was vegetarian, I pushed myself to see Earthlings.
Mm.
And it was really hard to watch. But I'm glad that I saw it because you know so much afterwards. And there's no turning back. That's the thing. It's like sometimes when somebody gets sick and they're vegan, they blame it on being vegan.
Hmm.
And if you come in for the ethical part, like you're not going back. If you don't feel well, if something's really wrong, you're going to go to a plant-based physician. You're not going to go to a doctor who's not following a plant-based diet and doesn't believe in it.
Right.
And so that I think is really key to people wanting to hold on to their vegan lifestyle. But then later, my son was my second child was sick with asthma and chronic ear infections. And I couldn't understand why we were vegans. I didn't know why he was sick. My skin healed. Why wasn't he healing? And why did he have those issues to begin with?
Right, because usually those are associated with cow's milk.
Exactly. And he didn't have cow's milk. Maybe at the very beginning, but then I went vegan and I went vegan in 1989, so maybe a little bit during my pregnancy I had some, but he didn't have any.
Right.
And he was born in 1990, and so I couldn't understand. Like he was sick, right? Really right away. It was like at 5 months old, he already was wheezing, and we were in and out of hospitals. And it wasn't until I started giving him more raw food and taking out the processed food that I saw the changes I wanted to see with him.
Mm-hmm.
And like 10, 11 months later, after juicing and bringing in a lot of raw whole plant foods, that's when I saw the improvement in his health. And the asthma stopped, all wheezing stopped. The chronic ear infections just came to a sudden halt. It was pretty amazing. And when I tell people my story, they're always surprised because they usually think that it should have been gone after the dairy, which for some people is.
Right.
For some people, asthma is gone after you give up the dairy. But we had to go further with it. And I'm glad that we did because I wouldn't have seen the healing that I saw with him. And that really opened up my eyes to a whole plant lifestyle, whole foods and not processed foods, and also incorporating a lot of raw plant foods. And when we did, that was when I saw the changes. And I felt like he had kind of something like what my grandmother had. He didn't have the emphysema, but he had the asthma.
Mm-hmm.
It's a respiratory condition, it's an autoimmune condition, and I believe it's a gut condition as well.
Right.
And he started building up a good gut microbiome by eating all these whole high fiber foods. And it's all the high fiber that heals the gut because the gut craves fiber, and there's no fiber in animal food. There's no fiber in, or little to no fiber in processed plant foods. Even if the processed foods come from plants, if they're processed and made in a factory, they're not going to be healthy. And they're not going to be good for the gut and building good gut bacteria. And neither are probiotics. I mean, probiotics, they lose a lot of what they do before they even get down to the gut. And so the best thing is to eat healthy whole plant foods to create that good gut bacteria that we want. And that's, I believe, what happened and why his situation turned around in under a year, in 10 to 11 months. And that led me to write my book, Creating Healthy Children. And then few years later, I wrote a recipe book that's based on whole vegan food. And then now, a few years after that, I've written Heal and Prevent Autism, Natural Solutions That Work, because I've always wanted to write that book, and I've written parts of it and never put it together. And then finally, I said, I'm just going to do this. My original career was as a speech and language pathologist, working with children with autism for the past 20 years, but working as a speech pathologist for 43 years. And I can tell you that 40 years ago, autism was 1 in 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Today, in my state of New Jersey, autism is 1 in 32.
Wow.
It's skyrocketed, and there's books on it, and it's scary because the expectancy is that by the year 2030, it's expected that autism will be 1 in 2 children. And a lot of it has to do with what goes in the mouth and what we're exposed to: heavy metals, pollution, toxins, glyphosate from genetically modified foods, and Roundup.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of problems with our food production. And so we really need to take care of our families right now because we're going in a negative direction and we want to get out of that cycle. And I really believe that whole plant foods are the way to do it. But even going more so, whole plant foods and raw foods and organic.
You're very passionate about raw foods.
I am.
What makes you so passionate about raw foods?
I am so passionate about raw vegan food because I have seen some dramatic recoveries. Certainly, my recovery, it started with going vegan when I stopped dairy. My skin healed. And then in 1994, when I went raw vegan, and I'm talking about raw vegan whole food, not processed, because you can even eat processed raw food. But I went to more of a whole food diet, and even scarring that I had from the skin issues, they cleared. And I saw the healing with my son. And I've worked with thousands of people over the past 22 years because I've been doing coaching. I'm a holistic health coach since 1998. And I have seen healing in all areas, and especially with chronic illness. The cancers, I mean, I just feel like they're not necessary. Most of it comes from food. There are other avenues as well, but a lot of it comes from animal food.
Mm-hmm.
And they're extremely high in estrogens. And when you're bringing in all that estrogen hormone into the body, it's overwhelming. The body can't handle all that estrogen. But you don't have that high estrogen in the plant world. So even people who have already had cancer and they transition to a whole food plant based diet, they turn their cancer around. And I've just seen it over and over and over again.
Right.
And heart problems as well. And, we see this even in some of the medical doctors who have worked with heart patients, that the heart disease can reverse, prevent and reverse. And I've seen also the same thing with autism. And I believe that we can turn around the autism epidemic. Now, autism by some is looked at as very positive, and some people who have autism want to celebrate autism. And I do believe that people with autism, many of the children who I've worked with, are brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
They have so much to offer, but a lot of them cannot communicate because of the autism. And so I have worked with some children who are so handicapped in the communicative area, they cannot engage with people. They are so frustrated that it causes many behavioral issues. So they are really stuck and locked in their body. And it's really hard to watch them wanting to communicate. And even with speech therapy and physical therapy and occupational therapy, they just, they improve, but they cannot improve enough to be able to get to the point where they are communicating successfully. And there are some who are higher functioning in the autism community. They are, each and every one of them, extremely unique. So no one is exactly the same. And some of the higher functioning people really want to celebrate autism because they feel that there's a lot of beauty in it. I agree with them, but I have also seen a lot where families are devastated. They don't leave their homes. They don't take their children out because they are having such a hard time with their child. If their child has a problem out somewhere, even going to a store, their child could, start screaming in the middle of the store. Their
Right.
child could start banging their head. It's just hard to know exactly how their child would react if their child cannot communicate something. And even parents who are so dedicated to their children, they very often are concerned to take their children out, and they spend a lot of time isolated. And so it's my goal to help those people. And I'm hoping that they find my book and can start a different way. I'm not saying 100% that this is going to turn everything around, but I've seen a lot of great improvement, and I have seen some kids who have turned around. And so I believe that there's a lot of hope for going to a whole foods plant way of eating, incorporating a lot of fresh plant food into the diet, and just really focusing on your child's communication through nutrition, through getting outdoors, because so many of us are sitting in our homes right now. And I'm trying to encourage parents to get your kids outside, because that's also really important for gut health.
Mm-hmm.
And for parents to just be there for their kids, to make eye contact and to connect with their kids.
Yeah, kind of put down the phone and connect with the kids, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And, we're being exposed to a lot of toxic metals in foods. Fish has a lot of mercury, and a lot of people think fish is healthy. A
Mm.
lot of people eat salmon. It's one of the largest fish. They think salmon is so healthy, but salmon is one of the largest fish, and it eats all the smaller fish. So not only does it have its mercury, it's got the mercury of all these other fish.
Right.
So salmon has a huge amount of mercury. There's chemicals that are in fish. There's a fungicide that was supposed to be banned decades ago. It is still in salmon and sardines. And, people eat these foods thinking that they're highly nutritious, that they have lots of omega-3 fats. You can get your omega-3s from plant foods very easily with a balance of healthy fruits and vegetables. You can get omega-3s from flax, from hemp, from walnuts, from chia, and just from a balanced plant food diet. You can get plenty of them. As long as you have a good ratio of omega-3 to 6, you can get plenty of them. And I teach a lot about this. I have courses, and I have an online program where I certify vegan and raw food coaches, and I give them everything I've learned over the last over 20 years. And a good part of that, we go over the omega-3 to 6 ratio, which a lot of people are unaware of, even in the vegan community,
Right.
because we can even get too much of omega-6, even in vegan foods, but it's even more so in the animal kingdom and with oils. A lot of the oils are really high in omega-6 fatty acids, and we just get way too much of it, and it's inflammatory.
Right. And that affects the gut microbiome.
Exactly. That affects the gut health.
What does your raw foods diet look like? Is it juicing? Is it just eating, we'll just say apples and fruits and things like that? What exactly does your raw foods diet look like?
Well, I started in 1994 with a very gourmet kind of a raw vegan lifestyle, and I was eating a lot of oil. I didn't realize that oil was so processed until later, when I was doing research and getting information for my books, and also going to a lot of speaking events. I've presented at a lot of different veg fests and met so many different speakers in the vegan movement. And so I've learned so much over the years that made me realize that, first of all, oil is 100% fat.
Mm.
And it doesn't have really very much nutrition. It's a highly processed food.
Right.
And I didn't realize, I always thought olive oil, I mean, the Mediterranean diet, I always thought that has to be healthy. It's not the olive oil that makes the Mediterranean diet healthy. It's the whole plant foods that they eat.
Mm.
And one of the main problems with the Mediterranean diet is all the oil. My recipe book does not have any oil in it. And it's much better for the heart to take away the oil because it creates a high fat diet very quickly. A little bit of oil is a lot of fat.
One of the things I found out when I was learning about being vegan was that you can cook with water instead of oil.
That's right.
It was very surprising to me because I was brought up like everybody else. You just throw some oil in the pan, throw your onions in there and start cooking them up, and you don't need that. You could just use water.
Yeah, that's so true. Can I tell you that when I started just using water and just stopped the oil suddenly, my husband, because I do cook for him. I'm raw vegan, but I cook for my husband. And when I made his soup and just used water instead of the oil, I make a really delicious soup. He loves it. I always had used a lot of oil in a red lentil kale soup.
Mm.
And I stopped using the oil and just used the water, and he didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So you can flavor your soup with herbs, with spices, and make it so tasty that nobody even knows that there's no oil in there. There's so much that you can do. And that was really a big turning point for me, was getting rid of all processed foods, even oil. And then later I started learning a lot about more of a lower fat vegan and raw food lifestyle. And that has been, the biggest turning point for me was the lower fat vegan approach.
How do you get the lower fat? Is that through the Whole Foods?
Through whole foods, but there's even whole foods like avocado is high in fat. So when I first started, I would eat like 3 avocados in a day.
You're saying I can't have avocado toast?
You can have avocado toast, but use like one small avocado.
Yeah, okay. All right, I
It,
can do that.
like I could sit and eat an entire bowl of 5 avocados and guacamole. I really could.
Uh-huh. Me
Because I
too.
love avocado. I love guacamole. I could sit and eat all that. But I know that it's not going to be good for me. I know that it's going to have, just too much fat.
Right.
Fat is fat, whether it's animal fat or plant fat, fat is fat. So I have lowered that over the years, and I'll have a small avocado. I'll have a small avocado with a salad, but I'll have so much variety now. And I really do focus on having a lot of variety. So every day I'm eating an abundance of different fruits. I'm having an abundance of different vegetables in my salad. And I feel satisfied. I feel satiated. I feel energized. I mean, I just have energy all day and night until I go to sleep.
Mm.
And I wouldn't want it to be any other way. And so it's really the whole plant foods. I like to say to people that even adding more raw food to the diet, I don't try to get everyone to go 100% raw. What I do try is I try to explain to them that plant foods, whole foods, and getting in as much raw food. That's my goal. As much raw food as possible. Just because I feel that without cooking, they have even more nutrient density.
Right.
And so just getting in as much as possible and slowly but surely taking out the foods that do not serve you, taking out the processed packaged stuff that doesn't serve you. And, if somebody has something once in a while, like pasta or bread, something like that, fine. But eating as much of your food whole as you possibly can, because that's going to really create a strong immune system. And then when something like a virus comes by, the chances are that you'll have a strong enough immune system to be able to fight it.
Right.
And that's really right now more important than anything else. Like we're told that we need a good amount of zinc. Well, we get plenty of zinc in pumpkin seeds.
Mm.
So add some pumpkin seeds. We're told that we need plenty of vitamin C. All whole plant foods contain a lot of vitamin C,
Right.
especially fruits and veggies. We're told that we need these things, that those are the most important for us right now. And so I really focus on those foods and getting it. You know, we're told we need a good amount of vitamin D right now. So getting out in the sunshine, making sure that you get enough sun. And if it's, you know, the colder months and you're not getting enough sun, then you'll either have to supplement or use a photo lamp. There are some really good lamps out there that will give you vitamin D exposure. Mushrooms also have some vitamin D. And so these are great ways to get healthy and really be thriving at a time when everybody's in fear.
Let's get back to your book, your third book, which is called Heal and Prevent Autism, Natural Solutions That Work. It took you 5 years to get this project together, and the foreword itself was written by Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who we all know is the co-author of the China study.
Yes, I was so thrilled when I was able to contact T. Colin Campbell. Now, he did give me a back cover endorsement for my first book, Creating Healthy Children, which I was super excited about, but I did not expect that he would be available to write a beautiful 3-page foreword, which he did with his son Daniel, who is a special education teacher. So it was really the perfect combination for writing for my book. It was the combination of my hero in plant food nutrition, T. Colin Campbell, PhD, along with his son, who is very knowledgeable in special education and in autism. And they loved my book and they were very happy to put their knowledge together to write the foreword. And so I felt like it gave my book closure. That's what really gave my book the final completion part, was their foreword. Because for the past years, I've just been gathering research and putting it together. And I think T. Colin Campbell loved that I had gathered all this research. I think I have like 29 pages of research studies backing up plant foods for autism. Also, the many other factors that are really important for the showing the causes of autism, preventing autism, and healing autism. And so I wanted to put that into a scientific book, which was also very personal. So there's the research, but there's also stories. There are some very powerful stories in the book. And it was interesting because in 2019, I speak every year. I'm one of the keynote speakers for the Woodstock Fruit Festival. And I spoke there in 2019, and I did a workshop there on improving your mental and neurological health. And somehow, this young woman, she was 24 years old at the time, she ended up in my class and put her email down on a newsletter sign up sheet that I had. And she listened to my class, which included a lot about autism, also other neurological issues I talked about in that class that affect the brain, such as Alzheimer's and brain fog and Parkinson's. But afterwards, when she was on my newsletter, I started sending out videos and information about autism. And she wrote me a really powerful letter about her own healing and how she did it on her own once she became a young adult. And she did it by going vegan. She went to Whole Foods Vegan. She started doing her own research online. And for many years, she was on psychotropic drugs. And she was able to get herself off of those drugs by going to vegan and raw food. And she also did some other healing modalities like cranial sacral therapy and others that I've included in my book. And she said in her email, I don't know how I got on your list, but I'm so excited to meet you because you're the only one teaching this for autism, and this is what I've done. And so this year at the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and I just got back from that festival last night, there were 400 attendees, and she was one of them. She came back to the festival, was volunteering, and I asked her if she would do a Q&A with me on autism, and she was thrilled to do that. And we did a very powerful Q&A where I asked her about her life growing up and being on drugs and how she felt, and also about coming out of that feeling of being locked in with autism, because she was very isolated. She didn't communicate. She didn't engage with others at all.
Mm.
And she was very pushed down by the drugs that she was taking, and the foods that she was taking as well. And it wasn't until later that she saw that raw vegan foods, in particular, the raw vegan foods that she was eating, were helping her so much, especially, she said, fruit,
Mm.
that her body was taking in the fruit, and she got an energy from them that she had never felt before. This amazing energy from fruit. And that really helped her to gradually get off the drugs. And now her mind is much more clear, and she's not as sensitive to sound and light and touch. Many of the children who are growing up with autism, they have a lot of sensory integration issues. So they are sensitive to loud sounds. A lot of them will not let you touch them. They are very sensitive to touch. And much of this, she still doesn't go into very loud places, but she can deal now with places where people are talking and there's multiple people talking. And if she does get overwhelmed, she knows what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, there were very strong reactions, like screaming, just like sitting there and screaming. And that's what a lot of the parents are dealing with their children, that their children can't deal with many different situations, and they have difficulty transitioning from home to other situations outside of the home. And so many of these families, other than sending their kids to school, they just stay home.
Now, what are some of the challenges that your book deals with as far as autism?
I talk about the heavy metals. I talk about glyphosate from Roundup. And, organic right now is really the best way to avoid that. Women should not be eating genetically modified foods during their pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about a lot of other things. I mean, there's so much in the book. I wouldn't be able to go into every detail, but there's even things in there like electromagnetic field,
Right.
because our kids today are being more exposed to EMFs than ever before. I
Right.
mean, we have 5G coming. This is going to be very strong electromagnetic fields. And so, like, I just purchased an iPhone 11. That's like the last iPhone that's going to be in 4G.
Right.
All the upcoming phones, iPhone 12 onward, are going to be with 5G, and that's going to be super, super powerful. So children growing up in homes where, like, I turn my Wi-Fi off at night. I also have an Ethernet cable that I use during the day that connects with the router. It's a cable, a cord that you can buy very cheaply on Amazon to connect your computer with the router so that you don't even have to use Wi-Fi during the day. And so these are things that I think will be very important for both preventing and healing autism, and getting yourself and your kids outside, being outdoors, and getting your kids bare feet, because you're going to be connecting with the earth.
Right. You're going to be grounding.
That's right. That's right. It's grounding. And being grounded is more important now than ever. So all these things, more now than ever before.
And then that's one of those things that people don't even think about. Everybody goes to the beach and they have this great time and they're like, "Oh, I feel great." And that maybe it's because you're walking around barefoot and you're actually grounding the only time you ever ground the entire time because you're always wearing shoes.
So important to do that. Like my son, he totally connected with that and he started walking barefoot everywhere. And now he lives in Costa Rica and
Hmm.
he's walking barefoot, unless, if he goes into the rainforest, he's planting a lot of fruit trees and he has a big vegetable garden. So he does have to wear his work boots sometimes. But he also walks a lot barefoot on the land. And it's very important to do that. Very important to connect with the earth. So no matter where you are, you don't have to live in Costa Rica or have a farm in Costa Rica to connect with the earth. You just have to take off your shoes and you can go hiking, hug a tree.
Yeah.
You know, hug a tree. You don't realize what's happening. You're connecting with the earth through the tree.
Right.
And it really does create a healthy gut microbiome because what you're touching, it does have a sensation for the whole body. And I believe that it can really help with so many things. So I am totally on board with the grounding principles, with attachment parenting, which I haven't talked about, but that's really being there for your children right from the beginning.
Mm.
Being absolutely present to their needs, not yours, but theirs. They're coming into this world as a new being. They've been inside a womb for 9 full months. You're looking to have a 9-month full term pregnancy. That's the best. And and then when the child is born, the child should be nursed by the mother. Breastfeeding is so important.
Yeah.
And of course, looking to have natural childbirths will be the best, to have a drug-free natural childbirth. And most childbirths can be natural, but if you're going with a medical doctor who is not focused on a natural childbirth and wants to do a cesarean, or who's not willing to wait while you're going through your childbirth, you might end up with something like somebody might end up with a cesarean, and it cannot always be prevented. There are some emergencies,
Right.
but so many people today who are planning a a C-section and not thinking about having a natural childbirth. And so I'm just trying to plant the seed.
Yeah.
The name of your podcast, it's really a beautiful name, planting the seed in people to eat healthy whole plant foods, to stay away from processed junk food, to connect your children with the environment and nature and get grounded, and also to, for someone who's looking to prevent autism and to give their child the healthiest chances at the very beginning, your healthy pregnancy should lead to a healthy natural childbirth, which is drug free. And, I don't want to make anybody feel guilty. There's nothing to feel guilty about. Sometimes a cord is wrapped around the neck, or a C-section cannot be prevented. In that situation, the best thing after the baby is born is holding the baby against the skin for the first hours, days, and weeks after birth. And if the mother can't do it, then the partner should be doing it, because that skin to skin contact is also going to be crucial. And I write in great detail about these things in my books, Creating Healthy Children, and also in Heal and Prevent Autism, about all the different aspects of attachment parenting that are so important to raise the truly healthiest kids who, in addition to being physically, biologically healthy, are also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually healthy.
think it's so important, getting back to what you just said about holding the baby to your skin. That is something that we did. It's just so important, especially for the father or the partner who's not the one delivering the baby, because that baby might say know you from your voice, but doesn't have a connection to you. So when you place that baby on your chest and you just kind of hold it, it gets that attachment to you.
That's right. And it's one of the most beautiful things that a mother can do for her baby. Certainly, fathers will hold the baby as well, but at the very beginning, it's best if it's the mother because the baby already has that very strong connection with the mother.
Right.
The baby knows the mother's heartbeat, the baby knows the mother's breathing, and the baby doesn't know the world yet. So
Exactly.
it's the most beautiful, positive connection to the world is through the mother holding the baby. And really, for those first hours, days, and weeks, it should be as continuous a connection as possible.
Right. Because, I mean, it only makes sense, right? It would make it feel safe.
That's right.
That's important when you're a new being.
And that child, it reduces the stress hormone cortisol and it increases the love hormone oxytocin. And I love to talk about this because
Mm.
it's really crucial. It's crucial. And most people are just not aware of it. And they're not aware that there's research in this area. There's a Swedish doctor, Dr. Nils Bergman, who talks a lot about the brain and that children who are given the most skin to skin earlier on in life, that it leads to higher IQs later on.
Hmm.
And just the fact that it decreases cortisol, the baby is more attentive, more alert, and feeling more right in the world, and so becomes well adjusted more easily and quickly.
Right. You know, one of the things that I love about your book is that it's backed by research. I mean, you have 29 pages of research to back up your book on autism. How did you go about getting all of this research together? I mean, I understand it took 5 years.
Yes. I have interns. I work with Ramapo College and their internship program for 11 years. And so I have interns who work with me, and they've done some of the research, but I still had to do most of the research for the book because there was a lot of research that I had to really dig deep for because
Sure.
I was looking for specifics on different topics that weren't that easy to find. But I found really everything that I needed. And there were also teachers in the vegan and raw food community who I've quoted throughout my book, and I have used their books as research. There's a wonderful speaker and author from the UK named Tony Wright, and he talks a lot about plant foods for the brain. And so I've quoted him and his research in my book, and there's many others also. I've quoted quite a bit from T. Colin Campbell, and there's others as well, Dr. Douglas Graham. And so I've included so much in so many different areas about how to go about healing and preventing autism, because even people who are looking to get pregnant, they can do things so that they have less of a risk. And also, people who already have a child with autism, no matter the level, the child can start making improvement. And in addition to the foods that I recommend and the causes that I recommend staying away from, I also include other healing modalities in the book. And I talk about how to incorporate them into your daily life so that you can get the most out of all the resources that come up. And, like one of them I mentioned much earlier on cranial sacral therapy. And I had a doctor who does cranial sacral therapy. I had him write a chapter for the book on what that can do for children with autism because it increases the blood flow in the brain.
Now, can you just explain what that is?
I'm not an expert in this area, and that's why I had him write the chapter for it.
I mean, just an overview. I mean, is it somebody like a head massage or?
It's kind of a very light head massage. You're right. It's, the person who does this massage holds the head very gently. Um, I brought my son for cranial sacral when he was healing from his asthma, and I felt that that would be a really good positive thing to do, even for something like asthma.
Mm-hmm.
Just because cranial sacral frees up. I mean, there's a lot written about it now that it just frees up the body, and it does a lot for circulation and movement, because so much is done in the brain stem, in the spine, for the brain, and the cranial sacral therapist was kind of like holding the back part of the head and lightly massaging around the head in different areas. Um, I have done it personally, but I saw how beneficial it was for my son, and I know how positive it's been for many people with autism, including that one young woman who comes to hear me speak at the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and who told me her story. She is now using cranial sacral therapy for herself, and she's seeing a lot of positive improvement for herself.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? Because the nerve endings, they have to end somewhere.
That's right. That's right. And the brain,
The brain and the feet, right?
the whole cranial area, you're thinking of autism, and very often, and even I talk about in my book that it is, um, there is some research showing that there is some problem with blood flow to certain areas of the brain. And this sounds like a perfect therapy to go along with whole food, plant and raw nutrition, and all the other things that I mentioned, and to have these things go along with diet and lifestyle change. I believe that diet and lifestyle change is huge, is really huge, but these other therapies go right along with it.
Now, what was it about autism that made you write the book?
Being in the environment of a public school for 20 years, um, watching many children being drugged and being fed the mainstream foods and not making the kind of improvement that I would have liked to see. I used to dream about what could possibly happen going to whole plant foods and nourishing the body. And that's really what got me started. That I just didn't want to see all these kids being drugged and being given all this food that doesn't nourish them. I feel like they have the best opportunity to make a lot of improvement by going to whole plant foods. And I've had parents come to me with 22-year-olds, and they're already they've already had autism for many years, and a lot of them don't speak, and they have a lot of behaviors where the parents are concerned to take them out of the home. But I feel that those kids can also make improvement. I can't guarantee anything, but I feel that this is the way to go. It's back to nature, back to our roots, back to the plant foods that we are supposed to eat. And I feel that that is going to be where to begin.
What is one cookbook or book that you have gifted to somebody transitioning to a plant-based diet?
There have been a few books that I really love. Certainly, when I see somebody who really needs it and doesn't have the funds to purchase it, I send them my ebooks because I want them to get right to it. But I love the China study, and I feel that if somebody is not already on plant food, and they want to see the science. The science is all there in the China study.
Mm.
I also recommend Dr. Doug Graham's book, The 80-10-10 Diet, which is an excellent book that I recommend along with my book, Creating Healthy Children. And then people who want to get started with recipes. I have my book, Raw Vegan Recipe Fun for Families, which has 115 easy, oil-free recipes for healthy living. And they're tasty and they're colorful. And a lot of those recipes are so easy that children can recreate them themselves.
Mhm.
So I love that. And there's other books out there like mine. Well, Dr. Graham has a recipe book, the High Energy Diet, the High Energy Diet Guide, and Brian Rossiter, who writes Fruit Powered Magazine. He has a book called Mouth-Watering Recipes that are also oil-free. And then, for people who want some cooked food, if they're just transitioning and they want some whole plant cooked foods, there's there's so many books out there. And Forks Over Knives has a website with a lot of oil-free plant recipes. So I will kind of hand pick those.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm working and coaching people, I take some of those cooked recipes and I just make sure that there's no processed stuff in them. And I'll send those over, so that they can start to transition to whole cooked recipes that are free of processed foods, as well as having whole raw food so that they have a variety, because variety is key and you want people to be happy and you want them to have easy recipes that they can just use in one piece of equipment. Like I do a lot just in the food processor or just in the blender. And I don't do recipes that take 3 days to prepare. In my recipe book, my recipes are usually like 10 minutes to make.
That's right up my alley. 10
Yeah,
minutes.
I live this way on a daily basis. I want them to be able to live this way.
Now, finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
So I would say before I became vegan, I would say confused is the word that pops into my head. And there's another word that popped right into my head as well, is detached.
Mm.
Confused and detached. And when I became vegan, I felt connected, conscious, and whole. And
Nice.
I believe that going to a vegan lifestyle, that even like I was saying, if one comes in for health reasons, that it should also lead to the moral and ethical part, because you're much more likely to stick with it that way. And if something goes wrong, you're not going to blame it on being vegan. You're going to heal yourself, or you're going to find a vegan physician or coach to help you with whatever it is. But I see whole plant foods really being beneficial.
It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Can you share with our listeners where people can find you on social media, Instagram, and the web?
So, the best place to find me would be, I have two websites. One of them is superhealthychildren.com, and the other one is feelfabulouswithfood.com. My books are all on superhealthychildren.com at the products page. And I also have a blog there. And if somebody wants to contact me, they can contact me through the contact page. I have some information about my vegan and raw food coaching there. On Feel Fabulous with Food, that's where I host my vegan certification course for anyone who is interested in becoming a vegan and raw food coach and spreading this valuable information, which I think is what I most want to do at this point. I really want to spread this valuable information. And I bring people in there's modules online, and they get coaching live every week online on Zoom with me. So that is the course, and that's a half-a-year course. And that's all at feelfabulouswithfood.com. So those are the two best ways to reach me, through my website. And I also host retreats, which I haven't been doing right now because of COVID. I host a women's health retreat, and I also host my Love Raw Food and Yoga retreat in Costa Rica. Which I'm not sure is going to happen in 2022. We'll see as time gets closer. But I also promote my son's raw food retreat in Costa Rica. It's a vegan and raw food retreat. So he hosts both vegan and raw food. And he's got a beautiful, beautiful farm right on the Pacific coast.
Nice.
And so people who are interested could contact him at Santuario de la Salud, the Healing Sanctuary. And it's, I believe that's the name of the website as well. sanctuariodeLaSalud.com, with no C in the Sanctuario.
Got it.
Yeah, and his name is Marco Ranzi.
All right, so look that up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Fred. It was awesome talking with you.
Thank you again for being on Plant Your Seed. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you so much for your podcast and for your work in this movement. We need to see so many podcasts like this. It's just a great way to get valuable information out to everybody.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.